We had some footnotes to continue. So here, I'll read really quick here. So we said the alam is everything other than Allah. So we talked about the word alam and the word alamun, and thus it is inclusive of all possible matters. So either you're going to say al-alam is everything other than Allah, or you're going to say al-alamun is everything other than Allah. If you say al-alam is everything other than Allah, then al-alamun is not plural of al-alam. Because al-alamun, if al-alam is everything other than Allah, then the alam is angels, humans, and genies. That is jinsu ma ya'aqil. Al-alamun is ismun li jinsi ma ya'aqil. Is the name of the type of thing that thinks or that has mind. Yani is the name of intelligent creature. Al-alamun. So that's less than everything other than Allah. If you say al-alamun is everything other than Allah, that's what Shaykh Abdullah says, rahimahullah. Then al-alamun is relative. It means world of humans, world of genies, yani world of angels, world of plants, world of animals, world of stars. Those are al-alamun, the worlds. So al-alamun is everything other than Allah. Then it is the plural of alam. It is the plural of alam under this meaning. And we talked about the difference they had about the derivation of the word alam. We talk about the alam because the chapter here is the beginning of creation. So beginning of creation, we want to talk about the totality of creation first. What is the total of creation? Is there a name for the creation in totality? Yes, al-alam. So we talked about this name and this thing, al-alam. And that has an upper part and a lower part. The upper part includes the seven heavens and what's above them, like paradise and the Arsh and the Kursi. And the lower part is the earths and what's below it, including hell. And what's below hell, which is the Farsh. The Farsh is the lowest point of creation. And we mentioned that heavens and earth is only part of the universe, part of the alam. Paradise and hell are outside of heavens and earth, but still part of the alam. And then after all of that, we started talking about actually targeting the meaning of the title here, the beginning of creation. We said anyone who believes that the first thing in the world was the light of Muhammad is not charged with blasphemy. Yani, we already said. Yes. So we said anyone who believes that the first thing in the world was the light of Muhammad is not charged with blasphemy. But he is deemed mistaken for opposing the hadiths that prove that water is the first creation. And we went through those hadiths. 3 hadiths here, 3 authentic hadiths that you will commit to memory so you can use them as proof and so you can teach without looking at something. And we mentioned that there is a hadith that literally means that the pen was the first creation, and we explained how it means it's relatively first, not absolutely first. So review that if you need to. And we said here, and this is where we need to continue, that there's no need to reinterpret these hadiths about the firstness or the precedence of the water for a flimsy, unconfirmed fabrication, which is this supposed hadith, أول ما خلق الله يا جابر نور نبيك خلقه الله من نوره قبل الأشياء. The first of what Allah created, O Jabir, was the light of your prophet. Allah created it from his light before other things. Now here in the body, we didn't explain the the flimsiness and it's being an unconfirmed narration, an unconfirmed fabrication. But here, it's not in bold. If we regarded this as a hadith, would have put bold letters. It's not in bold here. And also, this Arabic font here is a little bit small because we're not regarding it as a real hadith. And we can even take the bold off of there, and that looks so skinny. It's not real hadith, but it's valid to call, it's permissible to call a fabricated hadith a hadith. And it means, supposedly, according to the one who fabricated it, that's what it is. By the way, here, this is useful. So from here, like saying this, you might call something something based on what they're supposed to be. Doesn't mean you're validating it. That's why someone might call so-called gay marriage marriage, not because he recognized it. It's invalid completely to the speaker, and he would say this marriage, it means this supposed marriage, without him saying supposed, and you're not going to call him kafir for that, or some other things like that. There's other things like that. So we want to read the footnotes here about this flimsy, unconfirmed fabrication. So, as far as being flimsy, here's a footnote. This hadith is flimsy, raqiq. So, the word raqiq, it pretty much means, it translates as weak. But I don't want to say weak here, because we're going to use the word da'if. Yeah, we're going to translate da'if as weak when it comes to hadiths. Even though we're not speaking in Arabic, we still want to have our words clear. Like we have terminologies here. So instead of saying raqiq means weak, I want to say flimsy, just to use a different word. So this hadith is raqiq, it's flimsy. And the scholars of hadith said that flimsiness, rakaka, is evidence of fabrication. For the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Prophet Ahmad sallallahu alayhi wasallam does not talk with speech that has frail meaning, or speech that is poorly composed. The clarification of that is that in the first sentence it says, أول ما خلق الله يا جابر نور نبيك. The first of what Allah created, O Jabir, was the light of your prophet. So this sentence makes the light of Muhammad absolutely the first creation. But then the next sentence, which itself is enough to deem the hadith fabricated, says, خَلَقَهُ اللَّهُ مِن نُورِهِ قَبْلَ الْأَشْيَاءِ. This piece right here is enough to deem the hadith fabricated. It means Allah created it, that light, so-called light of Muhammad, from his light before other things. And this can be taken in two ways. Either way it is taken, it is mistaken. So it is at the extent of being problematic. Whichever way you interpret it, it's wrong. It can be interpreted in two ways. Either way, it's wrong. Or something else like that. If I don't remember to come back to it, remind me. For the light in this second sentence is either created or not. Meaning, you have two sentences here in this flimsy, unconfirmed fabrication. أول ما خلق الله يا جابر نور نبيك. The first of what Allah created, O Jabir, is the light of your prophet. So there shouldn't be anything before this light. There shouldn't be anything, according to this sentence, anything created before this light of Muhammad. So that means should not have a source. If it's first thing that's created, should not have a source So what does the second sentence say? خَلَقَهُ اللَّهُ مِن نُورِهِ قَبْلَ الْأَشْيَاءِ. Allah created it from His light before other things. That means has a source then. So there was something before it. So this, whatever was before it, is either created or not. So either ways, you got a problem here. That's how it can be taken in two ways. Whatever was before this light of Muhammad that's supposed to not have something before it is either created or not created. There's no third case here. So either way you take it, it's mistaken. So it's at the extent of being problematic. For the light in this second sentence is either created or not. So one, if from His light is a light created by Allah, then this is a contradiction, for it would mean that the first creation is a light from which Allah created the light of Muhammad, and thus the light of Muhammad would have to come after that light. It would be the second creation, and then saying that the light of Muhammad is absolutely the first creation would be invalid. You would think that will stop a person from talking. You'll be surprised. That's why talking to these people is, they're very stubborn. Allah Ta'ala, for this creed, who takes this creed, Allah makes his heart like a stone. I talked to one of those people once. He was bragging about how he leave Wahhabis speechless. Because they hate Wahhabis too. Wahhabis hate these guys. He's bragging how he leaves Wahhabis speechless. It's going to be because he doesn't give him a chance to say anything. It's not because he has some skills. That's how those people are. And number two, if from His light is supposed to refer to an attribute of the self of Allah. He said, who still talks like this? This is some groups. Looks like this is heavy in some Pakistani communities. I don't know how much further it goes beyond them. I never personally met someone who's like African Muslim, personally speaking here, African Muslim or Arab Muslim or Turkish Muslim or European Muslim. I never met someone who believes like this. Only personally, I've only met and seen people from Pakistani community talking this talk. If from His light is supposed to refer to an attribute of the self of Allah, because His light, that's an attribution right there. So what kind of attribution is this? An attribution of an attribute? Not an attribution of ownership here. Not merely an attribute of ownership, but an attribution. Not merely an attribution of ownership, but actually an attribution of confirming an attribute for a self. If that's what it's supposed to mean, then the calamity is worse and more abominable and uglier, because that would mean that our master Muhammad, Prophet Ahmad alayhi salatu wassalam, is a part of an attribute of Allah, that an attribute of Allah is His source, and that this is the source of His light, and that would be confirming that Allah is segmented, made of pieces, and this is blasphemy. This is Christian belief. This is how Christians believe about Jesus being the Son of God. Just spin on the words only. Just rearrangement of the words. Everything's still in the same position. Just switch words out and put different words there. Allah is clear of being segmented or made of parts. That is a negation of the oneness of Allah. Allah is one in the self and in the attributes. Nothing separates from Him, nor does He separate from anything. His attributes are not attributes for another. His attributes are not His self, nor are they other than the self, as stipulated by the scholars of Tawheed in their authorings. Believing that the messenger is part of a light from the self of Allah is like the Christian creed that Jesus is part of Allah. Common sense rejects this last sentence in this fabricated hadith. Yes. And some of these words we could take out this number 2 here if we wanted to shorten this. We could take out some of this that's present in other places in the book already. So, if from His light is supposed to refer to an attribute of the self, of Allah, then the calamity is worse and more abominable and uglier. Because that would mean that our Master Muhammad is part of an attribute of Allah. And that would be confirming that Allah has segmented, and this is blasphemy. And then all these sentences here. It's possible to omit these. But I just translated what was there. And the Shaykh will repeat these things in different places when he's making some point. Believing that the messenger is part of a light from the self of Allah is like the Christian creed that Jesus is part of Allah. Common sense rejects this last sentence in this fabricated hadith, meaning, what does that mean, common sense rejects? It means that it's not tasty. Believing in a first creation called the light of Muhammad really is not savory. Yani, someone would hear it and he would be reluctant to accept it. His self's not inclined. It's so superstitious and so suspect and unnecessary and far-fetched. So now the point is proven here. Up till here the point is proven. But now we have all these words because the Shaykh went through effort to refute this fabrication. And this book, the outstanding reference, is logging what the Shaykh said in so many of his books and putting it in its own arrangement, relegating some of it to a text, a metin, which is the body, and then relegating other details to footnotes. And so we want to read all of what the Shaykh has to say here. He said, rahimahullah, it is known that the Prophet's speech does not nullify itself. But what's here is merger itself still of when the Shaykh talked about this topic in different books. What we're talking about right now is not taken from one book only of the Shaykh. It is known that Prophet Ahmed's speech, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, does not nullify itself. Yani he doesn't contradict himself. This hadith, the second statement, nullifies the first. That's clear now. The messenger would never say something like this, so there is no evidence in it. So there is no evidence in it that the absolute first creation was the light of Muhammad. This hadith is not enough to debunk the hadiths about the water. It's not even stronger than the hadith about the pen. The muhaddith of the era, Sheikh Ahmed ibn as-Siddiq al-Ghumari, judged this hadith as fabricated because of its feebleness and objectionable meaning. It is poorly worded and it's contradictory. And what some from India have written in support of this hadith, that this hadith is included in what the scholars of hadith have said. Yani, the scholars of hadith said, if the nation has transmitted with acceptance a hadith which is weak by its chain of narration, it is authentic by other than itself. Okay, so this hadith is fabrication, and amongst those who confirm its fabricated status is Ahmed al-Ghumari. But some people try to support this hadith, not by deeming its chain strong, yani, as if they weren't able to, because if they were able to deem its chain strong, then there's no need to resort to this rule here. So, apparently unable to deem this hadith strong by any way of a chain of narration, then they resorted to another rule because they're too stubborn to stop trying to use a fabricated hadith. A rule which is that, this is a real rule, if the nation has transmitted a hadith with acceptance, if the nation has transmitted with acceptance a hadith that is weak by its chain of narration, it is still an authentic hadith, but it's authentic by something else, something other than itself. That's a real rule. But who said this hadith was transmitted with acceptance by the nation? He's gonna tell you that with straight face. He's not going to back down from you. This rule does not truly apply to this hadith, because what they meant by the nation when they said this rule, if the nation transmitted a hadith that's weak by chain, they transmitted it with acceptance, then it's authentic by something else, not by itself. What they meant by the nation is the mujtahids. An example is the hadith of the seawater. Its water is pure and purifying. Yani, we could take out pure. Its water is purifying, because if it's purifying, then it's pure. And its dead animals are lawful to be eaten without slaughtering them. Yani, if you found a dead fish, you can eat it. You don't have to slaughter it. So it was reported that the Prophet said this hadith about the seawater, the salty water. Its water is purifying, even though it's salty. And its dead animals are lawful, even if they were dead when you caught them. Yani, its animals are lawful to eat, even if you encountered them already dead. So this hadith, by its own chain, is a weak hadith, but the scholars passed it on. So then it's authentic by other than itself. It's authentic by their acceptance of it and passing it on despite its weak chain. Another example is the hadith that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade selling a debt for a debt. The four Imams and others gave verdict by what is dictated by these two weak hadiths. Yani, the mujtahids, they still use these hadiths. So then these hadiths are strong by something else. How is the hadith of the firstness of the light of Muhammad of this category? It was not mentioned by the mujtahids, neither by confirmation nor negation. They didn't confirm it and they didn't deny it because it didn't exist. So they didn't talk about it. That's one of the questions you're going to ask those people. How is it that none of the Imams narrated this hadith? None of the Imams spoke about this hadith? None of the early books of Aqidah confirmed this creed of yours? We didn't find in Al-Fiqh al-Akbar, didn't find it in Tahawi, for example, or in some other early book of Aqidah. Looks like this hadith of yours and the creed that it carries has skipped many generations of Muslims and then appeared somewhere, sometime. And none of the mujtahids narrated this hadith in their books, and it doesn't exist in any of the Ummahatul Kutub, the fundamental hadith books, like Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, An-Nasa'i, Ibn Majah, At-Tirmidhi, Muwatta, Musnad. All, yani, it doesn't exist in any of those books. None of those who have mentioned this hadith with acceptance is a hafiz. Is there anyone attributed to the people of the Sunnah who have confirmed this hadith? Anyone at all? Without regarding if they're qualified to do so, but they have done so? Yes. Without regarding if they're qualified to validate it, they have, some of them. None of those who have mentioned this hadith with acceptance is a hafiz, hadith headmaster. The hafiz that mentioned it amongst the hufaz who mentioned this hadith is As-Suyuti. And his statement does not promote that it is something that has been transmitted with acceptance. He didn't talk about this hadith like that. He is a real authentic, he's a bona fide hafiz of hadith who spoke about this hadith. And he didn't say anything about this hadith being transmitted with acceptance. How could this hadith be made to be of the same type as the two aforementioned hadiths that were transmitted by the mujtahids from the Salaf and the Khalaf with acceptance? And then their followers also transmitted them with acceptance. Meaning, it can't be. That's a rhetorical question. How could it be? Meaning, it's not. None of those people who take this hadith are able to confirm from any mujtahid imam, whether one of the four imams or any other one, that they mentioned this hadith. They didn't speak about this hadith. Nor can they confirm that from any of the mujtahids within the schools, such as Al-Jassas and As-Sarakhsi of the Hanafiyyah and Al-Bayhaqi of the Shafi'iyyah and Al-Lakhmi of the Malikiyyah, or Abu al-Wafa ibn Aqil of the Hanabilah. How would this fabricated hadith be in the realm of the aforementioned hadith of the firstness, be in the realm of the aforementioned hadith of the seawater, which was known to the mujtahids, and they applied it despite its weakness? So you see there's repetition here, the Sheikh's style. If I wanted to cut this down more, I could take some of the repetition out, but I'm not going to cut it down more. Those who mention the hadith of the firstness of the light of Muhammad are not even at the level of preponderance in any of the schools. Yani, the level of preponderance which traditionally is the lowest level of scholarship, traditionally. Then later, like in our time, the people came with a level even lower than that one, which is the level of the record keepers only, the naqala. All they can do is document. That's it. And say what was said. Some said that's a level scholar too. Traditionally, this is not counted as a level of scholar. In the first level that they count, which is the lowest level, is the level of the preponderator, or the last level if you want, which is the lowest level, is the level of the preponderator. The Shaykh says, those who mention the hadith of the firstness of the light of Muhammad are not at the level of preponderance even. Yani, not even at the level of preponderance in any of the schools. So that's like a Nawawi's level. Let alone being mujtahids inside the school. The extent of what these people have is that they found this talk of theirs in the books of some latter-day figures like Az-Zurqani, Al-Haytami, that's Ibn Hajar, Al-Haytami, Al-Qastalani, who is from the 10th century, and their likes, such as Yusuf al-Nabahani, who is from the 14th century, Al-Ajluni, Abu Bakr, Al-Ashkhar, and their likes. Shaykh saying none of these names is qualified to say what they are saying. How can they claim that this is something that the nation has transmitted with acceptance? Shaykh is saying these are the ones they have to say that this is transmitted with acceptance by the nation? For some people, that's right. Al-Haytami, what? Az-Zurqani. So no, this is not enough at all. Also, there are others whom they refer to who have come after Al-Haytami. So how's their argument here? Their argument is to tell you, Fulan said, and Fulan said, and Fulan said. So that's how they're going to present it to you. It's like so mighty, because they're going to tell you, Az-Zurqani said, and Al-Haytami said, and Al-Qastalani said, and Yusuf al-Nabahani said, and Al-Ajluni said, and Abu Bakr al-Ashkhar said. And along with that, he's stubbornly confident, unwavering. The consideration when it comes to authenticating and weakening a hadith is that it would come from a hafiz, that authentication. Either he documents that Either he documents that this hadith is authentic, yani he labels this hadith here and that hadith there as authentic, or he includes it in a book that he restricts to authentic hadiths, like Sa'id ibn Sakan, who named his book As-Sunan as-Sihah. Yani, that's an example of someone other than what you know, Bukhari and Muslim. You know, Al-Bukhari and Muslim have authentic books, Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. Maybe you're expecting that. Like Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. Sheikh taught you a new one if you didn't know. Like Sa'id ibn Sakan, he has a book called As-Sunan as-Sihah. Anyone know anyone else? Another scholar who has a Sahih Hadith book? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ibn Khuzaymah, Sahih Ibn Khuzaymah, that's number 3 after Bukhari and Muslim. Ibn Hibban, Sahih Ibn Hibban, and also counted amongst them is Al-Mustadrak by Al-Hakim, with whatever criticism goes there. Okay, so the consideration when it comes to authenticating and weakening a hadith is that it would come from a hafiz, that authentication or weakening. Either he documents that this hadith is authentic, one by one, hadith by hadith, or he includes it in a book that he restricts to authentic hadiths, like some that we just named. This rule was mentioned by As-Suyuti, yani this rule, that either he documents it or he includes it in a book that has that goal. Where did we get that from? Who said so? Is there any reputable one who documented that? Yes. This rule was mentioned by As-Suyuti in his millennial hadith terminology poem, when he said, وَخُذْهُ حَيْثُ حَافِظٌ عَلَيْهِ نَصْ أَوْ مِنْ مُصَنَّفٍ بِجَمْعِهِ يُخَص. Take its authentication when a hafiz documents that, meaning hadith by hadith, or from an authoring specific for the compilation of authentic hadiths. This hadith of the firstness of the light of Muhammad was not authenticated by any hafiz, neither among the early ones nor among the later, nor was it mentioned in a book whose author made it a condition to only document authentic hadiths. So there's repetition there. Nor was it mentioned in a book whose author made it a condition to only document authentic hadiths. As for a hafiz merely mentioning a hadith in a book of his, this does not prove that it is authentic. That's low blow there. If one of them tries that on you, either he's ignorant himself or he's testing your ignorance. Meaning to just say to you, Fulan narrated this hadith. That doesn't mean it's authentic because anyone narrated it. Merely being narrated, merely being documented does not make it authentic. Therefore, supposing Abdul Razak as-San'ani did narrate this hadith as they falsely claim, yani he didn't, but assuming that he did, for argument's sake, had he, it was not his habit to authenticate or weaken what he documents. Not in his musannaf, yani, neither in his musannaf nor in his jami'. Now his musannaf, neither in his musannaf nor in his jami'. Abdul Razak, he is a mighty hadith scholar. No one who has any acquaintance with the science of hadith would say that its mere existence in a book means that it is authentic. Yeah, so they're going to argue with you right there too, and they're going to try to not budge. Some claim that there is a copy of Al-Musannaf that has this hadith, but since this was claimed maybe about 25 years ago, that's whenever the Sheikh said this here. Because now, this knowledge is with me for at least 20 years. So it's more than 25 years ago. There has been no trace of this copy, but looks like they produced something since. Yani, I've argued this with some people. They say, no, it exists, and then they give you photographs of something. As for Az-Zurqani, Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, and others, such as Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr al-Ashkhar, in the explanation of Bahjatul Mahafil, and the author of Al-Mawahib al-Ladunni, Al-Mawahib al-Ladunniyah, and the author of Al-Mawahib al-Ladunniyah, that's An-Nabahani. As for them narrating this, usually when we say narrating, that implies that the whole chain is there. And usually that's when we say they narrated it, so if they produced it, I didn't look into these books myself. If they produced it with an entire chain, then they narrated it. It's a fabricated chain though. Or some of it. Yeah, and it's going to be fabricated from the point where some people picked it up and then they started narrating it from there, if it's like that. As well as they're attributing this hadith to Abdul Razzaq. That does not promote the hadith being sahih or hasan. So it's Sheikh saying all these words here because that's how somebody's going to argue with you. So you need to have this knowledge if you need to combat this argument. And none of those people said that it is. They only narrated it, attributing it to the Musannaf of Abdul Razzaq. And there's no evidence in that. Yani, for argument's sake, had it been in the Musannaf of Abdul Razzaq, that in itself is not going to make it evidence. And attributing it to Al-Bayhaqi is incorrect. All this, Yani, I think these people personally, in my own experience, I mean, these people are way more stubborn than Wahhabis. And that's far. I find them more arrogant. Abdul Razzaq said in his tafsir about the saying of Allah, وَكَانَ عَرْشُهُ عَلَى الْمَاءِ, his arsh was over the water. Yani, before. His arsh was already before. Yeah, before whatever is mentioned there in the ayah, his arsh has been already over the water. What did Abdul Razzaq say about this ayah in his tafsir? They are the start of the creation. But they are Bad'ul Khalq. Those two. Those two. He said those two are the start of the creation. Huma Bad'ul Khalq. Before the creation of the skies and the earth. So that's what he said in his tafsir about the first of creation. This makes it far-fetched that he mentioned this flimsy hadith in his Musannaf. Yani, I could put he in red since I'm altering it there. At-Tabari narrated from Mujahid that he said about this verse before Allah created anything else. Yani, another tafsir for this ayah, وَكَانَ عَرْشُهُ عَلَى الْمَاءِ, from Mujahid, student of Ibn Abbas. He said, before Allah created anything else, his arsh was over the water. So there is no light of Muhammad in any of this talk. Sheikh Ahmed al-Ghumari, the muhaddith of Morocco, said that describing this fabricated hadith to the Musannaf of Abdul Razzaq is a mistake, for it does not exist therein, nor in his Jami', nor in his tafsir. Author of Al-Mawahib Al-Ladunniya, that's An-Nabahani, the author of Al-Mawahib Al-Ladunniya and those mentioned with him, none of them is a hafiz, not a single one of them. All those names we gave, Al-Haytami and Az-Zurqani and everyone else we mentioned who gave credence to this flimsy, unconfirmed narration, not a single one of them is a hafiz. Those latter figures who mention this hadith are numerous. So that's how they're going to argue with you, by their mere numbers. Not by their qualification, but by their numbers. But their numbers do not benefit them at all, because they did not reach the level of a hafiz, not a single one of them. So it doesn't matter. Rather, some of them are muhaddiths that are acquainted with the field of hadith. That's Az-Zurqani. He is a muhaddith, he's not a hafiz though. So he has knowledge in hadith science, but somehow this one got past him. And some of them are not even muhaddiths at all, like Sheikh Yusuf al-Nabahani. Yeah, he's a layman who has some respect. He mentioned in some of his works that he is not a scholar, let alone a muhaddith. Because real scholar is not going to say he's not a scholar. Like Sheikh Abdullah, he's not going to say out of humbleness, I'm not a scholar. He is a scholar, he knows he's a scholar. So this Sheikh Yusuf al-Nabahani mentioned in some of his works that he is not a scholar, let alone a muhaddith. Because of this, i.e. not being a scholar, and because of his weakness in this field in particular, he inserted this hadith, which is considered fabricated by the hadith scholars, into his books Arba'in al-Arba'in and Al-Arba'in al-Wad'aniyah, saying that this fabricated hadith of Jabir, the first of what Allah created, O Jabir, was the light of your prophet, he created it from his light before other things, is authenticated by the inspiration of a wali, by a saint's premonition. This hadith, saying this hadith is authenticated by a saint's premonition, is meaningless to that degree. That's how far they go to argue this. And he's saying that to you for straight face. Because the inspiration or premonition that opposes the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has no consideration. The scholars of usul, the scholars of the principles of fiqh, said that the inspiration of the wali or saint's premonition is not evidence, because the wali's inspiration could be mistaken. This is not scholarly way to authenticate a hadith. Leave authentication of hadith to scholars, not to saints. Because a person could be a saint without being a scholar. And the scholars are going to use science to prove that hadith, not premonition. The obstinance and stubborn attachment to this hadith is extremism, ghulu. Wa subhanallahi wa bihamdihi.